These 25 fantasy standalones are considered the best must-reads according to readers on the fantasy subreddit Best Standalones to Read. Check the complete list in the description because here we're only going to be covering the top 25 and I want to present you a challenge for a total of 50 points. Let's see how many points can we score with these standalones. We will give each other 2 points if we've read the book and just 1 point if we haven't read it yet, but we have it in our possession. I did this before with fantasy series and I scored 27 points. However, I've read 77 fantasy standalones and I believe that I'm able to score more points this time. Let's see if I am able to actually do that. In the top 25, we have a story that really surprised me that is here because it's honestly one of the first standalones that I read and it has so much popularity. It's viral on TikTok and I reckon it's a perfect and beautiful story if what you're waiting or if what you desire is something that has a Greek mythology but that is written in such a phenomenal way. It's prose, it's really slow and lyrical, and there's this kind of story that you really want to just savor. Borderline purple prose, but it is so beautiful, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Basically the story of Achilles told from the point of view of Patroclus, which makes this story so heartbreaking from the beginning. And it's just, I remember clearly just reading this story, it will make you feel intense about life and about love, and it is a wonderful story. 2 points for me here. In the top 24, we have a standalone by an author that I believe I've read almost everything minus this story, and it's the only story that it is here from this author. Now, there's a reason I haven't picked this one up yet, and I believe it's not going to be really down my alley. This author for me has this unique ability of being able to convey this magic plus whimsy plus even nostalgia, and I'm talking about Neil Gaiman. And in here we have American Gods, which is a story that it's very different to other stories such as The Ocean of the Elaine or Stardust, Graveyard Book, Neverwhere. It's a story that in essence talks about this fight between the old gods and the new ones, but we will be following this character that leans more into the adult, that has more of this realism, and I am not super compelled to pick this one up. So if you've read it and loved it as these readers have, please let me know down below. So far, 0 points here for me. Top 23, we have a story that has been praised because of how beautiful and how layered and how different the story it's told. I've had It's Perfect if you like the Dandelion Dynasty because it's similar in the way that it is told, and I started this book and I can really say that I really see the potential. However, you definitely need to be in a certain mood to read it, and that's why I only have 1 point for these. This story is The Spear That Cuts Through Water, and what I've read so far of this story was already really fascinating, but at the same time I can really tell that you need to be in a certain mindset to really enjoy and savor this story, because although we will mainly be discovering this almost fight of this god and how this god is running away from her children and how this war that it's unfolding, the way in which it is told really blends fairy tale plus war plus characters, and it's kind of like a story within a story within a story. The chapters flow, the points of view also flow. It is very unique and it is not going to be for everyone, but it is beautiful and it is very character driven. So really recommend if you're looking for that, although I've just read like 100 pages. Position number 22, also 0 points for me, and this is a story that I actually learned from it last year, and since I'm aware of it, I've read a lot of praise about this book. However, I reckon it's very polarized around this book. Either you really love it or you are like, this book, it's super bizarre. It's been pitched as one of the most weird books that you can read, and it kind of blends fantasy plus horror, and it's very unique in that experience. It's also supposed to be a book that you don't really know what is happening, but that you need to trust from the beginning till the end, and eventually things will make sense and that you will like what happens. And I'm talking about The Library at Mount Char. Seems to be leaning more towards the horror as well, and it's supposed to be really atmospheric. We start with this idea of this father figure that takes children. You're not really sure if he is kidnapping them, and it's making them believe that he is a god, and one day he disappears and there's this library that still needs to be taken care of, but weird things start to happen, and it's also supposed to be savage competition between the different children. It is weird, even the description, it is so weird, and there's a lot of triggered warning, so it's not a cozy, cute book that is going to be for everyone, but it's supposed to be really, really remarkable. Top 21, we have a story from an author that I'm embarrassed that I haven't read more. I know this author is so very well loved. He is kind of like the king also of grimdark, and there are so many fans. He is great at depicting grey characters and adds just phasing us with characters and situations that are really, really, really compelling. However, I started one series from this author and I was like, not sure if this is for me. Really character driven. There's this humor on it, but I'm not sure the plot is enough to compel me. So perhaps this standalone, which seems to be also really character driven, but having a little bit more on the plot might compel me. But 0 points here for me as well, and that is Best Served Cold by Joe Abercrombie. This belongs to the same world as The First Law, and it seems that although you can read it separately, there are certain elements that you can benefit more if you read the original trilogy. Now, this story, it's a revenge story, which is going to be very, very persuasive for a lot of readers. I'm not sure I'm the kind of reader that really enjoys those type of characters. Also, the character depth, it seems that in this particular book, it isn't as superb as in others. But let me know down below if you read it and loved it. Top 20, we have a story that I'm actually really surprised that it is here. It is one of my favorite books, but I'm surprised because it's really incredibly short. In just a little bit more than 150 pages, the author is able to convey a story that depicts great magic system. It's hard magic system that is to die for. Great relationships, honestly. It's a good blend of character and plot driven. The stakes are high. It makes you reflect, and it is very fulfilling in such a short span. And that is The Emperor's Soul by Brandon Sanderson. This is an author that, yes, I am completely biased because it's my favorite and he is really accessible, but being able to really convey emotions in just so many pages is to me a feast itself, and it's a standalone that you definitely need to read because it's quick, it's a novella, and it's just so fascinating. It is done in the same world as Elantris, but you don't really need to read it to know this because they are in different places, but it's in the same world cell. We will be able to see different type of magic, blood magic, but also this drawing magic, which in my opinion, it's a little bit of a foundation of what we can see later on in Stormlight Archive. And it is so good, it is so short, really, really recommend. 2 points for me here. Position 19, we have a story by the same author that I actually believe should be ranked higher. I am kind of shocked that it is at top 19. Really, really blends a beautiful world building with a touch of romance, a touch of humor, the religion, the politics, everything that you read. It is so compelling, it is so fascinating that why is it only in the top 19? 2 points for me though. We have Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. This story really takes this idea of having two sisters and a fate and just brings it to completely other level. We will have different points of view as it's usual with Sanderson, and in here we will be able to see a more religious one, a more political one, and more adventure one. We also have a sword that it's sentient, like it's a character in the story. It is phenomenal. Really, really recommend. I know this isn't properly a standalone, it's supposed to have more stories afterwards, but you definitely can read it as it is right now, and it was considered as such also by the readers in the subreddit. Top 18, perhaps the story in this list that I believe it's not going to be for everyone. It's really a story that will be the delights of those of you that absolutely love the reflective prose and these almost riddles and just falling in love with what you're reading, but not really knowing what will happen, just suspecting. And for others that really want a coherent plot that from the beginning makes a lot of sense, then no, this is not going to be for you just yet. And this is How You Lose the Time War, and I also got 2 points here. This is a story though that I started reading, I DNF'd it, and I was like, this is not for me. Now I picked it up again this year, and this has made it as one of the best books that I read. It's a story that it is beautiful because we talk about these two different sides of a story. I reckon this is more on the sci-fi sides because we will have this time travel world between these two different sides, which you don't really know a lot about. And the only thing that you know is that there are these two characters that are sending letters one to each other. So the whole book progresses through these letters, and they are in opposite bands of this war, but they still find in themselves the idea of being in awe about the other. It's a story that it's beautiful, that it's touching, but not for everyone. Position 17, a story that I just finalized, 2 points for me. And I have an unpopular opinion here because it is not my favorite from this author, but it's considered one of the best books if you want to enter into the Discworld. And I'm talking about Small Gods by Terry Pratchett. Discworld, it's composed by a lot of different stories, and in themselves, most of them can be read as standalones. This one, it's probably just a standalone. In my opinion, the humor, it wasn't as sharp, although I reckon it's a beautiful entry if you want to see. It's one, a depiction of the world, and also this really humor of Terry Pratchett. Although this topic being very religious, it's really a hit or a miss in my opinion for readers. Position 16, we have a favorite, and I'm so happy that it's here. It's on the sci-fi side. It is so phenomenal because it takes one character and it just throws it in an impossible situation, and this character needs to cope with it, and he does so with optimism, and I love it. And I've mentioned before that this author, it's for me almost like cathartic because I'm able to read these stories and feel better. Like I cope with these stories. In this case, I loved the idea of figuring out what you need to do in a setting which is so different, but it's so persuasive, and that is The Martian by Andy Weir. It takes the quest of this character that it's alone in Mars and he needs to survive. In this context, there's more than just really surviving because you need to do stuff, but also how you cope with that situation. It is hilarious, it is wonderful, and it's a story that it's one of my favorites. Absolutely would recommend. 2 points here for me. And just when I thought that I was killing it with my points, I realized that I have not read, not owned the next book, a story that it's honestly a classic, and I am ashamed that I haven't read it. It's also leaning towards the sci-fi side of things, and it's a story that talks about time travel, but it also has deep themes around racism and how and why we perceive things, and how easy it is for us sometimes to adjust to situations, even if those situations are really unfair. It's supposed to be a book that it is not easy to read, but it is really, really important to read. It is transcendental for a lot of people that have read it. And I'm talking about Kindred. The story will basically take this black woman and it will throw her back in time to different stances, and we will be able to see how she is treated, which is very badly, as you can expect. It is a sad but very heart-wrenching read that I will hope to pick soon, although so far 0 points for me here. Position number 14, and you're gonna start to see that I am not as good as I expected with my standalones, especially in sci-fi. Another 0 points for me for a sci-fi classic. Talks about aliens and about how you cope with that society and how you try to change them. The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Shame on me, I know. This story basically will take the idea of we have these alien society and they don't have any gender, and we have then an emissary that wants them to benefit from all the good things that, you know, these societies all in all in space have, but he's finding a lot of trouble on setting which gender and how to treat them in this case. And it's not only a story about, you know, coping with new societies, but also what's the role of the gender. And although I read by the same author that she could have done more and that there's a lot more stuff that can be explored here, there are a lot of readers that really consider this story nonetheless very important. Position 13, we have another 0 points for me.
This is such a bad game I'm making.
This is a story that I actually didn't know a lot about before going into this list. It was more of a research effort, but it sounds really, really good. And I reckon it has been recommended to me before because it's this kind of story that it's epic, that it's set in a medieval setting, but that is at the same time almost cozy in the sense it's this classical fantasy that has this taste of what is honor and what is that you need to do, and that is The Curse of Chalion.
Or Chalion.
We'll be following this character that it's coming from war and that needs to adjust to the intrigues of the court. It's supposed to be a very political story that has a touch of romance here and there, and it has been praised so highly, really in awe on how ignorant I am for not knowing even about this book. So we'll pick it up soon. Position number 12, a polarizing book that it's a favorite for a lot of people, but it's also one of the most hated books for all the readers. And unfortunately, I haven't read it or own it, so 0 points for me also here as well. It's by an author that I've read before and that I absolutely loved. However, how polarizing the story is what actually detracted me from reading this, and it is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This story, it's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It's supposed to be really on the slower side. There's a little bit of romance, and it's a story that a lot of readers have DNF'd. I don't know why. Spinning Silver by the same author, it's very loved. However, this book is just meh. So if you read it, let me and other readers know what was your opinion. Position number 11, a story that I was today years old when I realized that it was set in medieval Spain. It's a story that talks about war, that talks about romance, and it's supposed to be also a hit or a miss for a lot of readers, and it is The Lions of Alrazan by Guy Gabriel Kay. This story talks about this massive land that it's divided, but the stakes are supposed to be really, really high. 0 points for me also here. Getting into the top 10, we have a story that I'm not surprised at all that is here, although it is very new, so it is an achievement on itself being in this list. It's a story that it's very cozy, that it's very whimsical, and that it reads in a breeze. It has this amazing blend of character and plot driven, and it is fun. We talk about pirates, and we have this retelling twisted of The Princess Bride. I'm talking about Dress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. This was the first secret project that was released last year, and it was a hit for a lot of people. It's told from the perspective of Hoyt, which is this wall hopper that appears in all of the different Sanderson books, and it is the first one that he is really narrating the whole book, and you can tell that his tone of voice, it is so charming. He's such a whimsy and a smart character. Also, the world building, it's really interesting. The magic system is, as you can imagine, really, really unique, and we have this girl that is just like very plain, and she is so brave, and I found that really, really inspiring. It was my first read last year, and it was one of the best. It's a story that I for sure know that a lot of people will like it, and maybe it's not going to be your favorite of all time, but I'm pretty sure that it is almost granted that you will like this book. Also, the illustrations are phenomenal, the humor is on point, and the crew is just fantastic. Position number 9, we have a story that I started and I DNF'd, and that was because it was very slow, very political, and I was not necessarily in the mood. This is a story though that it is very beautiful and that I should definitely give it another try. It's going to be 0 points for me, and that is The Goblin Emperor. We will be mainly following this character that will face the reality of they being the heir of the throne and they being immersed in the politics without really knowing a lot of stuff, which is hilarious. But the book will tell all of these in a very slow way, in almost a beautiful way, and it's supposed to be charming, cozy, a quiet book that it is also very political. Position number 8, and let me know down below if you're shocked that this book is here, because I am. We have a story by an author that we've already covered before, and that is also a Greek mythology. We have here a story that it's way more autobiographical than the first one that we said, and it is beautiful. It's also one of my favorites, and I agree it's better than The Song of Achilles. I'm talking about Circe by Madeline Miller. The story of Circe, the first witch, it's fascinating and outstanding on its way, but the way in which Madeline,
it's able, Mrs. Miller?
it's able to write it. It is so good because from the beginning you already feel for the character. It's not that you are going to be bored at any point, and it's just even if it is very biographical, there's so many stuff that happened to Cersei that the plot, it's non-stop. Also, if you're a fan of Greek mythology, there are going to be a lot of people here, Odysseus, a lot of different characters from the myth, and it was beautiful. I also teared up a little bit while reading it, and it just made me feel all the feels, and I absolutely recommend. Also, the narration, it's pretty solid if you're thinking to give the narration a try. 2 points. Position number 7, we have a story that perhaps it's the one that scares me the most from this list. 0 points for me. I know the author, it's fantastic. The premise is also really calling me, but there's something about the way in which this author narrates and this story that we have here that it really scares me. And that is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This story will mainly follow these 2 magicians in a setting where magic isn't any longer, or magic is dying. And there's this almost duel between these 2 characters. And although all of this sounds like The Night Circus, it is definitely not like it. It's not a book that will shine because of the magic, but because of the characters and how the way in which the story is woven. It is really scaring me because it's on the longer side, and I've heard that it is quite dense, but that it's phenomenal. So I want to read it, but I also want to be prepared for it. Position number 6, we have perhaps one of the best stories that you can read in winter, and it will really take you and it will throw you into this folklore, into this myth, talking about Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This story will follow this different woman, very set on this Russian-like environment, which is really frozen, and you see how they need to step up in every different way. My favorite point of view here was the one of the Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and although this story has different points of view and you don't know which of the points of view is at the beginning of the chapter, the way in which the story begins, the tone that it has really clearly allows you to see which point of view you are following, which is a feast in itself. 2 points. Top 5, one of my favorite standalones of all time made it into this list, also leans to the sci-fi side, and it talks about this character that will need to face the I don't remember anything trope, but also the quest, and also it seems that what I need to do is very important for the humankind. It's a story that shines for me also for the optimism, for the humor. There's something that cannot be told, but if you start reading it, it will completely steal your heart, and that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I really prefer this book. I know this book and The Martian are favorites, and it will really come to which tropes are your favorite. It leans also into the biology side, but also in the communication and to the engineering side, and it is such a wonderful story. I devoured this book. The narration, it's also absolutely stunning. Cannot recommend more. It's a story that I am dying to reread, honestly. Position number 4, and I am somewhat shocked that it is here because it's a story that it is gaining so much popularity lately that it is a standalone that everyone kind of thinks of when you're reading fantasy. It is a masterpiece of epicness, of elemental magic, of family drama, and of being different, because the tone, it's fairly different, and in my opinion, this story has such impactful scenes, not only because the war and the action, it is so vivid, but also because the emotions that this book convey are so intense. I've never in my life cried as much as with this book, and it is not only because the scenes are sad, which granted they are, but also because the way in which those scenes get you, there's this momentum. It is phenomenal how the author is able to create those different moments, so that when things happen, it takes your heart and it just breaks it. And that is The Sword of Kaigan by Emil Wong. This is my favorite standalone of all time. Part enraged, part happy that it is here, but it's only at position number 4. So 2 points for me here, and it's a story that I would recommend honestly for everyone. If you like fantasy but you don't want a commitment, just go for these. I promise you it's going to be phenomenal. You will need to be a little bit patient because the beginning it's somewhat slow, but honestly it's so good. Position number 3, we have a story that shines because of its humor and also because these two authors joined forces and made a story that it's fantastic, both on the humor and also the plot on the character side. And this is Good Omens by Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. This is a story, basically, it's kind of like the world is going to end. We have this alliance between the good and the evil. It leans more towards the plot side. However, I've heard that for a lot of readers, it felt a little bit short because the expectations were incredibly high. Now, I don't consider this to be a favorite of all time of mine. I won't rank it at position number 3, but this story, it is so easy. I believe it is very accessible regardless of your level of fantasy. You can access to it because it's really soft magic system. It is told in a very accessible and funny way, and it is a story that will definitely get you out of a slump. Position number 2, and I bet you're going to be shocked that this is position number 2 and not 1. Let me know down below in the description if you're shocked. And that's perhaps one of the most loved stories that we have, not only because this author, it's a classic, and I am ashamed that I am only having 1 point here because I have the book but I haven't read it, but also because it's such a beautiful quest with such unforgettable characters in a world that it is unforgettable, and that is Middle Earth, and we're talking about The Hobbit. Yes, shame on me. It's a story that it's promised to be funny, adventurous, and I love good quests, so I know I need to pick this one up soon. I'm really sorry to report that I didn't. Position number 1, we have a story that, although it's one of my favorites of all time, I'm also considering this as a shock that it is in position number 1. And also this story was the first one that it was bumped into this list and it won position number 1. And it's not because it was a book that was released last year or anything like that, but it's a story that I'm happy that it is getting to more readers. It is absolutely stunning. We will be following a character that it is really a cinnamon roll, and you want the best for this character, and the story in itself is told from the perspective of almost if you were a scientist. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. A thriller that goes more into the character driven side. It is really low in magic, therefore it's really accessible if you want to get into this world because it's more on the magical realism, and we'll basically follow Piranesi as he's trying to puzzle what is happening in this house that is as big as the world, and there are weird things that are happening here and there, and there's this mystery that you need to unravel as a reader. And as you read it, you will feel so many things that I don't want to spoil, but it is a phenomenal book. Now, if I'm doing the math correctly, all of these suppose that I've scored 28 points out of 50, which is not bad. I'm taking that as a win, but I definitely thought that I was going to be doing better than the 27 points that I did with the series. Let me know down below which is your scoring, and I cannot wait to chat about the books that you've read. And if you enjoyed this content so far, maybe you can consider joining my Patreon, where we have not only an amazing book club, but we also have reading sprints, we have game nights, and there's this amazing community of readers that it is just so comfy, so supportive, and we have game nights. There's such a good vibe, and thank you so much to all of you that support me and my passion. I cannot be doing this without you, so thank you so much. You guys are also killing it. We just made 15k subscribers. Like, how crazy that is. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I absolutely adore you. Thank you.